was kind of prompted to say something. I might have shared this before, but there was a lady who was a friend of my dad. My dad is, what I got from him is, we would call ourselves charismatic Presbyterians. He's a Presbyterian pastor, but believes that the Spirit, Holy Spirit should be fully worshipped, allowed, as if it's ours to allow, but somehow God works in tandem with our choice to either welcome or forbid, to believe or not believe in what the Spirit of God would do. And so he's the type that goes, hey, I believe the Spirit of God for healing and for anything else and for all the gifts. And he knew of a lady that lived on the East Coast, and the Lord spoke to her, and the Lord gave her a vision of a horrific earthquake coming on the West Coast. Something so severe, so horrific, it was just going to kill thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people. And she believed it was definitely from God. And it wasn't some dream, but a real vision. And she said, Father, is there any way this can be stopped? And God said, no. The earth has to let off pressure. God, then, is there a way to make it less severe? How about a bunch of smaller ones? And God said, yes. And she came out to California. She backpacked all along the mountain range of the fault line in California. She would walk it and pray and walk and pray, spend the night, walk and pray, and she prayed the whole San Andreas fault line. And since that time, there's been just a series of a bunch of earthquakes, small ones. So even though the scientists say, the big one's coming, so far it hasn't. And I say that because, you got the COVID virus. And as much as I wish I could just say, God, make it go away, He may say to us, it has to be here. Like the earthquakes, the earth has to, the earth is going to decay. The earth is falling apart. He's not going to hold off the tornadoes and the earthquakes, but He can, maybe we can, as Abraham with, God, we can wrestle. When God says, I'm going to go destroy this place, and Abraham goes, can I reason with you a bit? What if there's X amount of people there? Would you destroy it? No, And there's that conversation. And I think God invites us into that. And that we say, God, can we, okay, so maybe this COVID thing, obviously, Christians are praying all over the world, and we haven't stopped it. It's not ours to stop. But, is there a way, God, that we could be involved in minimizing things in such a way that somehow you receive glory, that people go, okay, there is something invisible that is at work, helping certain people out, blah, blah, blah. And so I just offer that as I say, we're going to, we pray for ourselves, but it's hard to say, Lord, let nobody at Landmark get infected with COVID virus. Well, 2 people just happened. All right. Because it's a virus and it's here, and there's the law of gravity. God does not get rid of the law of gravity for various reasons, very important reasons. And in the same respect, He doesn't just get rid of a virus. The virus is on the earth actually for certain reasons, but He will work with us. He invites us to work with Him in what happens with that, how it affects us. Is that okay? Enough said? Is that okay if I just throw that in there?
I agree.
Right?
I've been praying for the virus to go away, and then all of a sudden I realized I was praying for the virus to weaken.
Yeah.
To lose its strength.
Yes. Yes. So somehow, in all things, this is everything God invites us into, for all the, anyone who's willing to work with him, to intercede, to be a part of his work and his kingdom purposes in the world. I mean, if it's how viruses work and affect, and and how about the salvation of a dying human race. I mean, I think he hasn't he invited us into that whole thing. So I think as we wrestle with him, over somebody's salvation, we wrestle with him about what happens with the COVID virus. I mean, hell wants to take some people, all right?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want to just turn that over. I mean, we want to wrestle with God and fight for people's salvation. So, I just see a connection there. Boom. Let's go to Ruth chapter 2. And here, I might even say, watch what happens in the next couple of chapters, because we're going to watch, let's say, maybe it's a wrestling with God, a working with God to make something happen. To affect the cultural and the social laws of the nation, so that some widows, don't stay homeless or penniless. And this is, again, such a wonderful story, and I don't know how far we'll get to it, but the very last thing I want to say to you at the very end of the study of Ruth, I'd like to say tonight, but I'm not. I'm going to wait. Because when we finally get to the end, we've seen the whole thing, then you go, oh my goodness, now I know why it's here, why it's in the Bible, and just what it is. Okay, that's all let me say about that. Ruth chapter 2, enter Boaz. Okay, oh, by the way, who was here last week? Or was not here last week? Okay, do you know the story of Ruth enough to if I'll just say, there was a man from Bethlehem, of all places, where Jesus is going to end up being born. This is centuries before Jesus was born. This was during the Judges era. Elimelech, there was a famine in his tribe, and he decided to go to Moab, where God goes, don't go! I tell you, for the most part, he'll stay away from these people. But he decided to go there, and he leaves with his wife and their 2 sons. While they're in Moab, their sons marry 2 Moabite women that God said, don't do that. Right? But again, if God makes the laws, if God wants, they're his to change or to make an exception, which he does. Now, they married these Moabite women. Now, I'm not saying that was God's plan. It might have been. It's his plan. It's not that God doesn't want outsiders in. Eventually, the whole idea of the gospel is it goes to the Moabites and it goes to the whole Gentile, unbelieving world, pagan world anyway, because he wants them all saved. So, all we know is this. They go to Moab to avoid this famine. The boys, who knows how long they're there, but they're old enough, or they grow up there a little more, they get married. They all died. Elimelech and his 2 sons died. Of what? We don't know, but they died. Now we've got 3 widows. We've got Naomi, the mom, and these 2 daughter-in-laws, both Moabites. One is Ruth, and one is Orpah. Okay? And these 3 ladies, according to the ancient world, if there's no males in the family, they're penniless. Because women don't get stuff. Possessions don't go to them. They're handed to the sons. From the father to the son, to the son, to the son. And so they've got nothing now. They just got themselves. Naomi says to her daughter-in-laws, I love you both. I love you enough to let you go. I got nothing to offer you. I got no sons. I ain't pregnant. You wouldn't wait around anyway if I had twins and, they'd grow up and you marry them someday. Go back home to your own people. Find somebody. Find some boys. I'm cursed, and she literally thought she must be cursed. And sometimes bad things happen to us, and we actually start to think, am I cursed? I just got a string of bad luck. Does God hate me? Because he turned his back on me. And you imagine what she's thinking. And one of the daughters, Orpah, goes, okay. She at first pushed back, no, I want to stay with you. And then she goes, I'll leave. And for whatever reason, she decides, okay, I'll go back. And she goes back to, as we talked about last week, to a culture that has a God that it worships that sacrifices children. And that God asks for your firstborn to be burnt on the altar. Oh my gosh. She went back to go find a husband, and that's going to be the future of her baby right there, her firstborn. Nightmare. Ruth goes, I'm going with you. Your people will be my people. Hey, your God will be my God. Really? Yeah, I like this whole Jewish thing. I'm swapping. I'm going with you. Ruth shows back up, comes back to Bethlehem. They're walking down the street. People are going, hey, isn't that Ruth? I mean, Naomi? Isn't that Naomi? And, where's Elimelech? Where's the sons? And who's that lady with her? And she goes, I got a new name for myself, and it's Mara, which is bitter. Call me bitter, because, man, my life is nothing but bitter. And where we leave off is it says they arrived back to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. What that tells you, without telling you straight out, is God's timing is perfect. And they just so happen to show up at a certain time. That will lead now to something Ruth is about to do to try to make money for the two widows, Mom and me. That leads to who she's going to work for. That's going to lead to Mr. Right, Mr. Handsome. Okay, so this is awesome. Okay, there's the setup. So here we go, chapter 2. If somebody please would read the first 7 verses.
Now Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's side, a prominent rich man of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain, behind someone in whose sight I might find favor. She said to her, go, sweetheart. So she went. She came and gleaned in the field behind the reapers. As it happened, she came to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Just then Boaz came from Bethlehem. He said to the reapers, the Lord be with you. They answered, the Lord bless you. Then Boaz said to the servants, who was in charge of the reapers, to whom does this woman belong? The servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, she is the Moabite who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers. So she came, and she has been on her feet from early this morning until now, without resting even for a moment.
Wow. Okay, so Boaz, the first thing we find out in the first verse, and we're told this to kind of set up what's about to happen. Who is Boaz? Okay, he's a distant relative, it appears, of Elimelech, Naomi's husband that died. And he's a man of great wealth. Okay, that is very important. 2 very important things right there. He's a relative, and we talked about the kinsman redeemer thing. We're talking more about that tonight. And he's got money. And I'm simply telling you, to be a redeemer, to be the one who can redeem what is lost, it's going to require some cash. So you're told right there, like in parentheses, to set the stage. Now, Naomi just so happens to have a relative. Now, she doesn't realize at this point in the story that he's nearby. It just simply says she's got one. She doesn't even know that he's there. She doesn't know that she's arrived, and she's going to have her daughter-in-law is going to run into him. You understand? And then we find out what Ruth does. Now, more about Boaz, since we've just been introduced to him. Again, who is his mother and father?
I don't think we know, do we? Oh, yes, we do.
Who's Boaz? This is huge. mother is Rahab,
Oh, that's right.
the prostitute, who as a little girl, probably 16 years old, hid the spies up on the roof when Joshua was leading the people to the promised land for the first time. And here's the first place to take out and march around the walls. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and Rahab hides the spies, and Rahab's the one that said, listen, we all know that your God has been doing this and kicking everybody's rear as you've been coming your way. We're scared to death. We believe your God's going to hand us over to you. And would you please do me a favor when you come in to do this? Would you please protect me and my family? And they said, yes. Hang this scarlet tassel in your window, so when we come out, we'll see where you are, and whatever, we'll come get you before everything, And so all we know is, in some fantastic way, as the walls fall down of Jericho, hers happens to somehow not, and they get them out, and Rahab lives with the Israelites, and she becomes a follower of their God. And she ends up marrying a guy named Salman, we're told. Now, who's Salman? We don't know. My instinct tells me he was one of the two spies. That's just I just got this feeling. That's who Salman was. That she married one of the two spies. And they have a baby. Boaz. It's fantastic. Now, Salman, Boaz's dad, is a descendant of Perez. Perez was one of the twin sons of Judah and Tamar, his daughter-in-law. Remember that we talked about this? Right? Who dressed up like a prostitute because her husband died. So, he's from the tribe of Judah. So Boaz, that also is very important to know, the Messiah is going to come from the tribe of Judah, so Boaz is in that line. It's in Matthew chapter 1, as you look at the genealogy of Jesus, that tells us where this guy named Salman married Rahab, the prostitute, from Joshua chapter 2. And what's interesting is that she's one of the few women to be mentioned in the lineage. Okay? But she's, if we have more time, she's called in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 31, a heroine of the faith. Rahab. In James chapter 2, verse 25, she is noted for her righteous works. Because James talks about, when Rahab hid the spies. And I'm telling you, she did that at risk. She risked her own life. If they would have found out that she hid these Jewish spies, they would have killed her and her family. Okay, so she's mentioned in the New Testament 3 times. Because again, she's included in the genealogy of Jesus. So, we also find out right here, what was just read, that Ruth is a hard worker. She politely requests permission from her mother-in-law to go out into the fields where this barley is being harvested. And, her statement is, perhaps I could find a friendly landowner who's going to allow me to, follow behind the harvesters, picking up the stalks that they might leave it lying on the ground. Because if you remember, Mosaic law mandated that the gleanings of the field were left for the poor, for strangers and for widows and orphans, so that they can have some dignity and not just get a handout, but that they can work and feel like I worked, I earned what I just got. And what they pretty much says is, listen, if you got a lot, don't harvest the edges of your crops, of your fields, like if you got 100 acres, this way, leave a half acre here, a half acre strip over there, save that for the widows, for the orphans, for the poor folks, so they can actually come along. You're not paying them. They're not workers of yours, but they need some help. But they're going to work for it themselves, and it gives them some dignity, and that's what they did. So she knows how it's supposed to be, and so she goes to do this. And at one point, as you saw, as it's written, Ruth happened upon the field of Boaz. Well, that's God directing Ruth's steps, just as he does ours. The story stresses that Boaz is a godly man. Again, Boaz is Rahab's son, which shows that you can have a terrible past and still have godly offspring. Think of Rahab. Okay? Imagine what kind of parents Rahab and Salmon were. Rahab was never going back to her old life. She lived through the deliverance of this God of the Jews, where everybody else in her city died. And a whole bunch of them died when the walls fell. But she and her family were not, because these Jews promised, as our God lives, you're protected.
No, she lived in the wall, and
she lived in the wall.
Yeah, she didn't die.
She didn't die. I mean, imagine, this is amazing. So, you can imagine what she is, who she is as a Jewish believer, as a Jewish convert. She's probably the most on fire Jew, convert that there is. She's probably more on fire than any of the Jews of the day. Okay? Just think about it. It's like, they always say the best kind of dog you can get is the one from the pound. Because it kind of always remembers, it kind of knows you saved it. So here is Rahab, and I'm sure she and Salmon were absolutely amazing parents. And you imagine Rahab just instilling in her son Boaz. Now, I want to tell you who your mother is. And I was a foreigner. But your daddy loved me, and these people that you're part brought me in. I want you to consider this. Boaz, his mother, was a Canaanite. Out of all the men that are, having fields that are being harvested, there's not another man in the biblical story that has a mother who was a prostitute in Canaan. She was not a Jew. Do you think Boaz, who loves his mother, his Canaanite convert to Judaism, do you think he has a heart that would be soft to a foreigner, another Canaanite, like a Moabite woman who's coming near the Jews? God set him up because of his mother to be soft towards Ruth. Like he could see in real time, because he wasn't around to see what happened with his mom. He just heard the story of her conversion to Judaism and to the Jewish people. But he's going to watch this in real time with this other Canaanite that just so happened to be on his field. So Rahab had a real passion to live for the real God, raise her son accordingly. And I want you also to consider that Rahab is probably still alive at the time the story is being told. We're not told that she died. Chances are she's still alive. And I wonder what kind of a mother-in-law she would have been to Ruth.
Just what she needed.
Just what Ruth needed. Amen? So, I want you to notice Ruth was walking behind the reapers. And it says that Boaz inquired of the foreman who she might be. He's going, who's that girl over there? I don't, is she on the payroll? Ask the foreman. And the foreman says, oh, that's Ruth. He knows who it is because his job is to know who's in the field. Do you belong here? And chances are, he's the guy that gave permission, unless she just kind of showed up and started walking with everybody. I guess I'll do this until I have to ask permission, more formally. But he says she's the Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the land of Moab. And then she requested permission to glean after the reapers of the field, and the foreman granted the request. Now, Verse 8. If somebody will go 8 to 13.
Then Boaz said to Ruth, "You will listen, my daughter, will you not? Do not go glean in another field, nor go from here, but stay close by my young women. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Have I not commanded the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn." So she fell on her face, bowed down to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" And Boaz answered
My mom was. Go
and
ahead.
said to her, "It has been fully reported to me all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and how you have left your father and your mother and the land of your birth, and have come to the people whom you did not know before. Then the Lord repay your work, and full reward to be given you by the Lord of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge." Then she said, "Let me find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and have spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I am not like one of your maidservants."
Can bring tears to your eyes. He is considerably older than Ruth. That's why Boaz called her my daughter. He obviously sought her out. The foreman says, well, that's who that girl is. He obviously walked over. And he wherever she was, and he goes over there and, "Hey, welcome. My foreman just told me everything about you. About, what happened. Gosh, I'm so sorry to hear about your husband and your father-in-law and your brother-in-law. But I also heard about you leaving your land and your family and coming home with this, your mother-in-law who's Jewish. And, may the Lord reward you," he says, "for your deeds, and may you have a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." He recognizes something, if not even sows a greater vision into her own life. Like, I don't know if you really realize what you did, but did you know that this is what's going on here? You have come to take refuge under our God. Best decision you could have made. Glad you're here. I'm glad to know you. You're welcome to my field. It's all yours to go, clean it. He invites her to join the women who were working for him. He gives strict orders to the male servants. What?
Leave her alone. Not yours.
Don't touch her. Why? Do I need to explain? Okay. Don't hit on her, guys. Because guys can do that. Go, hey, check that. Hey, you see her? Look. Who's that? New girl. Think she's single? Think she's dating anybody? You think I got a chance? No, you don't got a chance. So, don't hinder her in any way. Ruth is overwhelmed with this kindness of his. And then she couldn't help but ask that why she, a foreigner, would have found favor in his sight. And, he explained it's because of everything that he heard that what she did for her mother-in-law. And, but where did he hear that?
Well, the foreman probably told
Okay,
him.
the foreman. But
Townsfolk too.
the the thing is, I'm not sure, I think what's inferred really is that there was already word buzzing around. He heard about some gal that she was a Moabite, she's in town, and she came back with the 3 men. And then the foreman goes, "Hey, this gal, just so you know, she's a new gal, and I think he puts 2 and 2 together. He's got some information from the foreman, and he maybe didn't even want to tell Ruth, actually everybody's talking about it, we all know who you are. And he just kind of said, hey, the foreman filled me in. But I think he has more information than what just the foreman told him. It makes sense. That's what's kind of inferred. And Boaz pronounces this blessing on her in the name of God, which is great. And again, listen, he prayed that God might provide for her a full reward for all that she had done. And little did Boaz know that he would be the answer to his own prayer. Amen?
Amen.
He doesn't even know yet. He's going to be the answer to his own prayer. How often does that happen for us? Okay? Pretty cool. So, let's go 14 to 16.
Now Boaz said to her at mealtime, "Come here and eat of the bread, and dip your piece of bread in the vinegar." So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed parched grain to her, and she ate and was satisfied, and kept some back. And when she rose to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. Also let grain from the bundles fall purposely for her. Leave it that she may glean, and do not rebuke her."
Huh. So Boaz buffs her out, as they say. Buffs her out at mealtime. Has his servants pull out grain from the tied sheaves for her to glean. I mean, literally, it's like, pull out some handfuls for her from the bundles. What are you taking? So, I mean, really? I mean, okay. And she returns home with a doggy bag, let's say, and some grain for Naomi. And verse 17 to the end of the chapter, somebody. I think all we're going to do is finish chapter 2 tonight. My goodness.
So she gleaned in the field until evening, and beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. Then she took it up and went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, so she brought it out and gave to her what she had kept back after she'd been satisfied. And her mother-in-law said to her, "Where have you gleaned today, and where did you work? Blessed be the one who took notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, "The man's name with whom I work today is Boaz." Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be he of the Lord, who has not forsaken his kindness to the living and the dead." And Naomi said to her, "This man is a relation of ours, one of our close relatives." Ruth, the Moabitess, said, "He also said to me, 'You shall stay close by my young men until they have finished all the harvest.'" And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, and that people do not meet you in any other field." So she stayed close by the young women of Boaz to glean until the end of barley harvest and wheat harvest, and she dwelt with her mother-in-law.
Like, Naomi's in on this a little bit too, though. She's like a bit of a encourager.
Oh, she's going to be a
What's
yenta.
happening? She's like,
She's going to be a yenta. Total Jewish mother-in-law. Absolutely. She's the matchmaker. So, Ruth comes home, arms full. Look at all this food I got. And what happened today? Well, let me tell you, there's this guy named Boaz, and so when Naomi finds out it's Boaz that Ruth was working for, the lights went on, obviously. And, have you not had this experience? You hear something, and all of a sudden you have spiritual eyes to see what God is doing even before He did it. Even before it's all done. You already know where it's going. I already know where this is going. You been there? And so, Naomi clearly saw what God is doing, and I want you to consider the confidence in which she interprets the likelihood that Ruth is going to end up in Boaz's favor. Ruth catches on immediately, and she adds some information. Boaz protects the women, in his employ, I think she's maybe got some hopes up for something. But for her to just come out and go, you know, Boaz, and I think it's as if, oh, I forgot about him. You know, he's our, well,
Kinsman.
it says closest kinsman, but it actually, the Hebrew is, he's the one with the right to redeem. Literally. He's the man. She points that specifically. So, you know, our thing, oh, he's our closest kin. It's more than that. In the Hebrew, it's, he's the one with the right to redeem. He's the key. You know, he's our magic wand, honey. And so, to close, we'll talk about who that is for a moment. In the Old Testament social structure, the kinsman redeemer, or the one with the right to redeem, had 3 responsibilities. And we see them in several scriptures. Number 1, he had the right to recover forfeited property of a kinsman. He doesn't have to. He can pass on. He has the right to. It doesn't say the obligation. See, the kinsman redeemer is not the one obligated to redeem. It's the one with the right to redeem. It's yours if you want it. Okay. And that's found in Leviticus chapter 25, verse 25. Second, if somebody had fallen into slavery, the nearest of kin, the one with the right to redeem, the kinsman redeemer, was to purchase that person's freedom. That's Leviticus 25, 47 to 49. 3, we're told that if a brother died, leaving no male heir, the kinsman redeemer, who would have been the dead man's brother, was to marry his brother's widow and raise up children in the name of the dead relative. That's Deuteronomy 25, verses 5 to 10. But again, usually these things all required some wealth. So that term, kinsman redeemer, in Hebrew is one with the right to redeem. He's in the position to redeem what was lost. Which is why we also call Boaz the Christ figure of the story. Because of what he's going to do. It's going to cost him personally. But it's going to mean the world to these ladies. And it's 8 o'clock. You know, the only other thing, you know, that might point to is, you know, verse 21, you know, Ruth said, you know, he even said to me, stay close to my servants until they finish all my harvest. I mean, I'm going to keep you here for the whole season, the harvest season. Wow, Mom, I got a job. We got food for a while at least. Okay, that's nice. Verse 22, Naomi then said to Ruth, it is better, my daughter, that you go out with his young women. Otherwise, you might be bothered in another field. Meaning, hit on? Or, you know what? Not everybody takes favorably to Moabites, to foreigners. So, it's good that you're there, but listen, women work with women, but the men work together. Y'all women, y'all stay together, work with his female harvesters, and stay there. And that's setting the stage already. This is where you need to be. And she's not going to let on, I don't think Naomi is about to let on exactly what's happening yet, but she will in the next chapter. When I think she has a little more confidence in what she believes God is going to do, and then she's going to play the Yenta. But at this point, she's arranging for success for Ruth and for herself. Any thoughts, any comments, questions?
So Boaz hired an illegal alien
Boaz hired an illegal alien.
with no green card.
They had
With no
open
green card.
borders back then.
Say it again.
They had open borders.
They had open borders back then. Yeah, they did.
No, what I thought of when you said the conversion of Rahab
Yeah.
to
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 Judas.
give her heart totally to Judaism. And those converts become the more zealous. It reminds me of a modern day Jew who sees the light
Oh.
and accepts the Messiah.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Talk about some of your most on fire Christians. Yeah, they're the Messianic Jews. Oh. Yeah.
I find it interesting that in ours, what she harvested, the ephod of barley, as a footnote, is basically it was almost 3/4 of a bushel.
Yeah, that's pretty significant. Right? Her arms are just full. I mean, you just go, what has she got? I mean, that's wonderful. A big bag of food. So, and yeah, and what's the weight? I mean, well, you know,
3/4 of a bushel.
weights and means and measures back then compared to now. I gotta look more closely. But, I mean-
Been probably somewhere between 60 and 75 pounds of grain.
Think about that.
But
That's
then you gotta take it back and
That's a lot.
remove the grain from the plants, put it on a flat rock, and crush it with another rock, just to make the flour. And then you gotta build a fire, and you gotta have a pan or something to cook it in. So there's a lot to it before you actually get to eat it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Isn't that great?
You work hard.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
The King James in verse 12 said, his blessing on it says, the Lord recompense thy work, and a full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wing thou art come to trust.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you think of, that's what she's done. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what anybody's versions say in English, but yeah, the same idea. You know, you come to trust, take refuge because you trust in that God. I mean, you've bet on our God as being the right place to be, and you've made the right decision. Okay.
I think she had obviously made that decision before she ever left her home. She saw the right way to go.
And you wonder, when whoever the son was that she was proposed to, Naomi's son, we're not told, was that an arranged marriage? Chances are there was something like that going on. And her parents allowed it. They approved of the wedding, the marriage to a Jew. But you can imagine just the world of difference that home would have been. Elimelech and Naomi.
Any community that kills their babies.
Right? Gosh. Yeah, think about that. And then you got these people actually, they hold to the sanctity of life. That's a different world. Anything else?
The name Ruth it means friendship. And so maybe she just was loyal to her mother-in-law after the death of her husband.
Sometimes you live up to your name.
Where her sister's name, Oprah, was stubborn.
Orpah, yeah.